Greeting audience, we are from 6E class. This is our presentation for final project of Psycholinguistics course. In here, I'm as the representative of my group. You can see the names of member groups on the slide. Our topic for this project is about language processing in children with language impairment, so let's start. First, theories of SLI. Specific language impairments or SLI is developmental disorders that affect the mastery and use of language in children. There are several theories that propose and explain about the cause of specific language learning, in which the theories are divided into two perspectives. First perspective assume that the children with SLI have problem in innate structure of grammar that prevents the application of productive more syntactic rules or lead to erroneous parameter settings for a language. Second perspective proposes that the children with SLI have intact underlying grammatical structure, but the processing system, such as working memory, attention, general processing that are essential for acquisition of language function less than optimally. During the process of acquisition, children with SLI may develop weak representations or grammatical structures. There are result in within individual variation in the use of these structures at any one point in development. Therefore, a child might produce a grammatical morpheme in one situation, for the example, a sentence, the dog's running, but omit it in another becomes the dog chasing the cat. Children with SLI use grammatical markers because they memorize particular information only. Assumptions of processing capacity limitations. As everyone knows that the brain of human has their limit capacity, in which the brain of human has function to process and set sensory information, which only be able to do particular tasks only, because when the human brain accept the information too much, the information will be not caught well and the partial information will be not accepted well. The main assumption is the children with SLI are the children who have an intact grammatical, but the children with SLI tend to process the information slowly and need longer time. Specific theories of processing capacity limitation in children with SLI. The works that can be done in short time tend to be caused by the span in accepting and process the data or information. If we differ between the development children and children with SLI, the children with SLI tend to comprehend and produce language, so that the children with SLI are slower in giving responses and also left behind from the other development children. Surface hypothesis. Children with SLI have capacity limitation. Children with SLI, some verbal input will be lost because they cannot process the information quickly enough to store it in long-term memory. The information like to be lost includes from consisting of low phonetic substance. Deficit in temporal processing. There are three evidences of a temporal processing disorder of the children with SLI. First one, cannot respond to rapidly changing acoustic events as are found in consonant to vowel transition in speech. Second, difficult to detect difference between the tone when the ESE or short interstimulus intervals were short and when the tones were brief duration. And the third, had difficulty identifying the CV pairs when the four-man transitions were presented at a normal rate, but improved when the four-man transitions were lengthened. Working memory limitations. The children with SLI face some limitation in working memory. For example, when they are asked to repeat nonsense word ranging from 1 until 4 syllables in length, they make more errors overall and make more errors as the number of syllables per word increases in comparison to their typically developing peers. Second, they had lower levels of activation in areas of brain responsible for attentional, memory, and language processing. Children with SLI have structural weakness in verbal working memory that affect the acquisition and use of language. phonological deficit hypothesis. In this stage, the children with SLI have difficulty translating auditory form of words and more pain into a phonological code necessary for learning this form. Poor phonological representations may have a significant impact on the acquisition and use of grammatical morphology. Linguistic complexity. Here, there are three problems faced by children with SLI, such as, first one, the children with SLI make more error or use fewer linguistic features than their typically developing peers as complexity levels increase. Second, they also make more grammatical error than their typically developing peers. And last, they have difficulty interpreting the meaning of sentence when the clausal embedding was used to add complexity to a sentence. If the children with SLI are given too much information while they learn, it will overwhelm them and make them slower in learning. Third, and next, implications for assessment. Here, clearly there is evidence to support processing capacity limitation for at least some children with specific language impairment. Therefore, truthful evaluation of processing capacity that have sufficient sensitivity to identify an existing language impairment and ideally have some evidence of construct validity for assessing processing capacity limitation that can help clinical and researchers differentiate children with SLI from other types of language impairment. Therefore, it is critical that clinicians and researchers need to be careful in reading test manual to determine if the test items are indeed assessing processing capacity or some other aspect of language. Next, here there are tests of processing capacity. Even though there are few standardized measures of processing capacity exist, some specific tasks have emerged in the literature as assessment of processing capacity. And short-term memory, some can be found as subtests of larger language assessment by traits such as non-word repetition subtests of the compression test of phonological processing. Here, non-word repetition test, one of the more promising measures for identifying SLI is the non-word repetition task. Experts found that children with SLI have significant difficulties with non-word repetition compared to their typically developing peers. Even compared to younger children with match for language level, children with SLI perform significantly worse on this task. Non-word repetition cannot be viewed as a strictly non-verbal task purely assessing children's processing abilities. Clinically, non-word repetition may be a task best utilized as a screening tool and not as the primary assessment of processing limitations. Next, sentence repetition task. Another type of repetition task is sentence repetition. It shows promise as an assessment tool for processing capacity limitation and identification of SLI, because children with processing capacity limitations, such as SLI, should perform poorly because the complexity of the sentence increased. Sentence repetition was found to be most accurate measure studies showing both high accuracy and predictive value. Next, there are complex span tasks. Here, completing language processing tasks, or CLPT, was designed specifically to assess processing trade-offs in children as young as 6 years of age. Experts revealed that the CLPT was far more taxing for children with SLI than for their typically developing peers. The sixth one of processing involvement in other language tasks. Language testing can be considered as a remedy for a dearth of standardized processing assessment measures. Tasks in formal language testing usually draw on some aspects of processing, and each can task the capacity of the child's system in different ways. The last one is the dynamic assessment of paradigm. This method is considered as the most effective method in evaluating processing capacity in children with SLI. The focus of DA, or dynamic assessment, is not the answer from the child but the process the child used in creating the answer. The A paradigm can provide specific information about how their processing ability differs from their typically developing peers. Now we move to implication for intervention. This perspective provides to the framework from which intervention approaches will be discussed. Children and adolescents with SLI may experience difficulty with one or more of the various aspects of spoken and written language, such as phonology, semantic, grammatical morphology, syntax, and paradigmatics. The following intervention practices are meant to serve as illustration of a broad range of language treatment methods that serve. The first one, to make the language signal more salient. Second, to decrease processing demands. And the third, to compensate for the processing limitation by training metacognitive strategies. Now we move to decreasing processing demands and making the signal salient. The signal must be made more salient for the children with SLI who are difficult in processing the speech signal. It can be by modifying intonation, stress, pause time, or rate of delivery. It was found by Montgomery and Leonard in 2006 that children with SLI were more sensitive to morphemes of low phonetic substance when the intensity and duration of these morphemes was increased. It was also stated that a slower speaking rate may be better for children with SLI on novel word learning. In addition, empathic stress in word learning also gives benefit and can promote language learning for children with SLI. Now we move to focus stimulation. Here, this one refers to the technique where the linguistic target form is made highly salient by modeling it at a high frequency rate in a natural context, and this treatment is effective. Conversational recast. A recast is a response to a child's inaccurate or immature utterance that both correct the utterance and includes additional phonological, semantic, and or grammatical information by Kamatara and Nelson in 2006. We can conclude that recast is one of the type treatment to make the child have a good sentence with adding phonological, semantic, and or grammatical information to complete the sentence. For example, when child say baby sleep and adult, the baby is sleeping. Based on the sample above, the child say one sentence but still inaccurate utterance, so the adult helps him to complete the sentence based on the grammar. If this treatment does continually, the child can understand unconsciously and can speak English correctly. Now we move to self-talk and parallel talk. Self-talk and parallel talk are both techniques that fall under the umbrellas of child-centered approach by Fay in 1986. Self-talk is a speech term. It simply means talk about what you are doing, seeing, eating, touching, or thinking when your child is present. In other words, narrate your action. For example, I'm cooking. I'm making cute cake. Yummy. Parallel talk is another speech term and is the close brother to self-talk. To use parallel talk, talk about what your child is doing, seeing, eating, or touching. In other words, narrate what he is doing. For example, you are building a big tower. Wow! Now we move to elicited imitation. Elicited imitation is an intervention technique that directs a child's attention to a target form by highlighting it in contrast to another syntactic target form by Cliff and Fee in 1997. The test administered or test application elicits an utterance from the test taker by saying a sentence, and then the test taker imitates or repeats it back. Next, modifying the speech input. The author tries to give speech signal to children by compared language and auditory processing outcomes of children with language impairments assigned to one of 4 treatment groups. The children who receive PVWL intervention and a similar computer program without a modified speech signal perform better on a subtest of phonological performance that did the children in the other 2 treatment conditions. The author suggests that children should demonstrate improvement in language and auditory processing skill when they receive a timed, intensive interventions that requires that they focus on and immediately respond to verbal input, coupled with feedback from attentive adult and interaction with peers. Next, teaching memory strategies. Here, children with SLI require strategies that allow them to remember information long enough to use it in learning or for academic demands by Collisson and Ecker Roberts in 2003. After give this treatment, the children who received it show that traditional direction, instruction, suggestion better than imposed instruction alone, at maintaining the ability to follow direction after the period of direct instruction ended. Finally, the concern that adolescents with LLD not only require direction, strategy, instruction, but also need to be taught how to act strategically in applying these learning strategies. Okay, I think that's all that we could deliver to you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you can give a suggestion or comment about this topic, this material, and this video, how I deliver the material. Okay, bye.